Hello, personal productivity enthusiasts and community. Welcome to Anything But Idle, the productivity news podcast. Today's show is brought to you by W3 Consulting, and I'm Ray Sidney-Smith.
And I'm Augusto Pinaud.
And we're your hosts for Anything But Idle. This is episode 32, and we're recording this on November 30th, 2020. Each week, we cover and discuss the productivity and technology news for the week. And so with that, let's get into the headlines, Augusto. What is our first headline this week? We're going to go through some Apple news, it looks like.
Let's begin with the Apple news. Apple released 14.2, but it was an interesting release. They have done this in the past, but it was specifically for their iPhone 12 mini and fixing text messages and a couple of other bugs. So they have done this. They did this, and I think part of the reason they have done this is to avoid the leaking, of the features of the device. This is not the first time they did it, but hey, if you got an iPhone 12 mini, make sure that you update to the last or the right version of this. Our next one is talking about features of Big Sur, Mac OS Big Sur. And, now that they've been using it more, even that it still is not my main machine, I'm continue impressed of how well certain things work in comparison to Catalina. Again, MacBook is not my main driver. My main driver is the iPad, but there is still things that I do in the MacBook, and I've been impressed how I have an old MacBook Air 2013 because there is no reason to upgrade it, but that now having the same messages between the iPad and the MacBook, that has been nice, because it was something that, a lot of times you get that and you get a message and just go pick another device because it was so annoying how that works. So there are things like that has worked incredibly well. Interestingly enough, I was really looking forward for the iPods switching between the devices, and that has turned to be a nightmare. It may be because I have too many of them, I don't know, but a lot of times I am on a call on the AirPods, and then I move my head or change device, and suddenly I lose the call. That has been annoying. There are ways to fix it. You can tell them to basically disable the AirPod switching, but it was something that I really was looking forward of the romantic idea of, oh yes, and grab the other device and change automatically. And I really didn't thought about, but what when you're using multiple devices in the same call? That do not work as well as I plan in my mind. Our next item is Craig Federighi talking about running native window on the AIM-1 and on the new Mac chipset. The news and the reports we have seen has been incredible on this chipset, and it makes sense. I mean, they integrate everything. They made it in a really nice way. And even the reports we have seen on the speeds on the Macs and the comparisons between the old MacBooks and the MacBooks Pro with the new ones are really incredible on so many ways. So there is a lot of people wondering, can I put Windows in this thing? And so far, you cannot. I was reading over the weekend, somebody already port a version of it, not the official Microsoft version, but as Craig Federighi said, it's up to Microsoft. And based on what we have seen on the news lately about other companies looking to get into this ARM, I may see as a possibility that they really jump into this wagon.
I'm skeptical. I think that eventually someone will make Microsoft Windows, at least version 10, work on the M1 chips. The reality, though, is that Apple is. I even heard Linus Torvalds, the progenitor of the Linux kernel, which we all know is running, people say Linux, but it's really the open source operating system on top of that. And the the whole notion of the M1 chips is that Apple is moving into this more island unto itself architecture. They are creating a privacy wall around their entire ecosystem, and they're only letting in those who they want to let in. And so I'm really curious whether or not this is really their shot across the bow to all software developers, all, folks generally, that they're going to be controlling this. And if you want to play with them, you got to play by their rules. And they can do it now because they're making the chip, they're making everything. So yeah, I'm not particularly interested in running Windows on a Mac anyway, but I think that seeing folks kind of bend the rules and making it work will be interesting to watch.
Oh, it is always looking interesting to watch. That there is an incredible big market to the Hackintosh, and I will wonder if we are going to start seeing the opposite. I don't know.
All right.
So now we go to our Google world. And the first news we have is the Alphabet CFO explaining how Google fixed a dip in productivity during the early days of the pandemic. And I'm going to say my business works or move into Google Meet. And that's a big, big thing for all this pandemic. And do they have done some things great? Yes. I don't know if I necessarily agree with 100% of this article. Yes, they did it. If you go and close it to what they have done to their company, yeah, when they did, that work from home option to summer 2021, they were really a guidance for that. But if I look into that only, maybe, but I don't know.
I think they're talking about their internal employee response to the pandemic, and the fact that they basically increased the number of meetings and ways in which they were capable of checking in with everyone, and that, of course, what the CFO talked about was the idea that Google then was able to create more cohesion among their team by doing so. And I don't doubt it, but I don't work for Google, so
right. I don't work for Google either. So I don't know. What I have seen in other companies who have been increasing those checkups has not necessarily been that. So
yeah, and I think the bigger statement from that article, at least as I read it, was the fact that going back into the office is going to be the more complicated problem that Alphabet as a company, which is inclusive of Google, is going to have to really deal with, because sending everybody home, a lot of people work from home, and certainly at Google, they know how to, but bringing them back into the office, I think, is going to be the more challenging piece. And that seems to be what the Apple CFO was kind of noting here. So yeah, that makes sense to me.
And it is a challenge. It is a challenge for we discussed this at the beginning of the pandemic. There was three kind of people: the ones who always dream about this, and now they discover they don't want to come back, and the ones who love the office and cannot see the moment to go back. But the ones who wanted to have this and now been on this for maybe a year, those people, they know now, they proved their point. They proved that they can do it. They proved that they don't need to go back. I don't know.
Yep. So next up in the news is Google Docs.
Finally.
Google Docs, Google Sheets, and Google Slides for iOS now supports Microsoft Office editing. And that's with the impending change also that Microsoft Office editing will be the default process. The Office editor will be the default process for all of the platforms at some point in the future. And so whenever you open an Office file, whether that be a DOCX, XLSX, or otherwise, you're going to open up in that Office editing format.
And that is finally, because that has been, as much as I understand, if you are going to deal with corporate America, you need that. I don't care what machines you decide to use. Word is still the standard on many corporations, especially large size corporations. So I'm really excited for the people who work with them who don't want to have Microsoft Office for no reason. I think is so exciting that now the iOS will do it and will do it by default. So I am, for one, pretty excited about that.
Yep, absolutely. Next up is Google Messages with their RCS functionality, which is their, I think it's real-time communications or something to that effect. Their RCS platform is now globally rolled out. So those of you who are on Android, we are now in the two silos, right? We have Android on one side and we have iOS, the Apple Messages ecosystem on the other side. And now if you are using an Android device and you are in one of the latest operating systems, I can't remember which one it goes back to, but in essence, you will now be able to message with another Android user in Google Messages, in the Google Messages app, the Android Messages app. And you will then start to see, like the moving dots, just like you would on iOS or otherwise in one of the messaging apps generally. And you will be able to send stickers. You're capable of liking, thumbs upping, things of those nature. Now, also, they are going to bring end-to-end encryption to those messages as well, meaning that the messages are, Augusto has a private key, I have a private key, we share the public key, and only we are able to read the messages that are on either of our devices. This is a huge step forward, and I'm very glad to see it. I hope that at some point Apple and Google are capable of, really it's Apple in this particular circumstance. Apple needs to make the step outward to allow platforms to integrate with messages, and the rest of the planet is Android based, and a very small percentage is Apple Messages based, and so it really is up to Apple to come join the rest of the planet and make the ecosystem work together so that we can all have stronger encrypted messages, and not for there to be this weird classist blue bubble green bubble problem that we consistently have going on right now. I choose not to be on an Apple device in terms of my phone, but there are a lot of kids out there who don't choose that. They can't afford an Apple device, and that creates this strata in schools and bullying and all kinds of other problems. So I am very much on the point of saying, let's bring RCS as a universal piece to everybody, and that will not only make us more productive because we're going to be more secure, but it will also be something that lowers this whole nonsense of one platform versus another kind of situation that we keep hearing about. Moving right along, Google Meet has now brought attendance reports within the workspace environment for more tiers. So as I understand it, or as I'm reading here in this 9 to 5 Google article, it is now available in Google Workspace, which has replaced G Suite. It is now available in the tiers for Essentials, Business Plus, Enterprise Essentials, Enterprise Standard, and Enterprise Plus. So it was in Enterprise for Education before, and now it is scaled out to those additional 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tiers of Google Workspace. And so, Google, are you going to be using this, Augusto? Are you going to see your children's school using this?
It is interesting. Our children's school was on Google Meet, and they moved out of Google Meet to Zoom because Google Meet had a problem that the teacher cannot, if a student gets in the meeting before the teacher or the organizer, they are the considered the organizer for Google Meet. So we had at the school some issues of students kicking the teacher out, blocking other students to log in. And as much as I, as an adult, find it hysterical, and I may or may have not done something like that if we'll have had the chance when I went to school, for the student, for the school, for the teachers, was a nightmare.
Fair enough. So next up, Chromebooks are now going to be getting PDF annotation within a new media app, is what I'm understanding. And so if you're using, in essence, Chrome right now, you have the ability to read PDFs. Coming forward into the future, you'll have an annotation feature that will give you the ability to then mark up both the inside of a PDF. You have text and then you have images. So those two different types can then be drawn on, in essence, inside of this PDF annotation tool. And so it'll be interesting. I'm not quite sure why it's a new media app as opposed to just bundling it into the existing ecosystem of the PDF reader itself, but that's how they chose to do it. And so you'll be able to do some level of editing. And so, like you get a PDF PDF form from, say, the IRS or another government authority, and you want to be able to fill it out by quote unquote hand on screen and then save it and send it back, this will hopefully give you the capability of doing that. And that just lowers the threshold for signing documents and all kinds of other things of that nature. And so it'll be really interesting to see how this all works out. Any additional thoughts there, Augusto?
I think this is really interesting, and this is showing how much we are getting used to the form factor and the signing online and all this, that as much as, the people in the technology and all that have seen this signing and PDF and all this for so long, finally is coming to the Chromebooks. Yes, there are high-end Chromebooks, no question about it, and you can install the software. But when you bundle this now as part of the browser, or an easy thing that people can associate to the browser, what it reads to me is we are finally getting to critical mass, and we're finally getting to the point where people now seeing this as something that, okay, everybody do it. So that's really cool.
Absolutely. Okay, and to round out, is this rounding out our? Oh no, we've got a little bit more Google news.
A little bit more to go.
Second to next, Google Assistant arrives on the Fitbit Sense and the Versa 3. So Fitbit has these two models of smartwatches, and they're bringing the Google Assistant to it. I think this is going to be great. I just want Google Assistant in everything. I think this is fantastic to be able to bring these devices online in terms of smart assistants, and so I'm great. I'm glad to see them bring it to all of the platforms. Google owns Fitbit, if I'm not mistaken.
They're trying to integrate it. There has been some issues in Europe with all this and about what they're going to do. But yeah, mostly they own, and they're turning them into, basically they're trying to turn them into the Google Watch at some point, even if they keep the Fitbit brand. But I think I agree. It's great. It's having the assistant on the watch, it is awesome. So I think if you live on the Google ecosystem, I think that will be really powerful.
Yeah, they said that. So this is Fitbit OS 5.1. So that's rolling out in the US, and it seems like US only right now is going to be adding Google Assistant. It'll be in English only for the time being. Obviously, they'll want to see how it works out in that market, and then scale it out to the others over time. Next up,
but the Google already listen in so many languages that is just a matter of turning a switch to.
Yeah, and they want to make sure that the Fitbit devices can handle multiple languages and all. It's a processing power issue. It's not necessarily that Google doesn't have the data. All the microphones in it. They want to make sure all those pieces work fluidly with it. So next up, The Verge is made the announcement that Asus, which makes many different Chromebook and Chrome OS devices, announced a new Chromebox 4 with a 10th generation Intel processor, where you'll have an option between a Celeron or a Core. And so this is really great news. The Chromebox is one of the form factors of Chrome OS devices. So you have all kinds of Chrome OS devices. If you go back a few episodes, I actually outlined, I think, all of them. And we have a wide variety of different Chrome OS devices. And one of those being the Chromebox, kind of like a Mac Mini, small form factor box, and very portable. If you wanted it to be, all you need to do is connect power, mouse, keyboard, and display, and you're up and running. And having this new one come out gives more credence to the fact that they're obviously popular, and more people are going to want them. And I'm certain that in a school environment, you're going to see more and more of this come about, especially if children are working from schooling from home, and some of those are going to stay. Some of those children are maybe going to stay schooling from home, and that will allow them to have a small form factor device that you can. I mean, really, it's so small you can just put a little mount and put it underneath the desk, and then you're not taking
actually even better. It comes in the box with a Visa mount that you can put in the back of the thing, where you will put a mount. So you already get that in the box. so you can put that thing behind the TV immediately.
Yeah, so you can mount it behind the display. So does come with a display mount, which makes it kind of like an all-in-one, desktop device. You get a nice display and put it right behind it, and then you don't have to have any footprint on the desk itself. And so, yeah, I'm really excited to see all of these Chrome boxes kind of coming out. I know that next year we're going to have a proliferation of Chrome OS devices. We're going to see a lot of Chromebooks coming out onto the market. And so 2021 is going to be a fun year to be talking about Google Chrome OS. I've talked long about the fact that it is the future of much of the processing on in the world. I mean, that's how many people in at least first world nations are going to be coming online and utilizing the world. And so seeing the proliferation of devices that give so many different form factors for the various ways in which we use and need computing devices, I'm just excited to see that.
But not only that, it is really an incredible platform. I mean, we have discussed in previous episodes about how to get old devices that are really not operable in current standards to bring it to current standards using Chrome OS or just Neverware cloud, and make them really a Chromebooks that will work completely fine. So that also opened an incredible platform and an incredible space for devices that can be recycled now, that really will extend the life of the thing for a long time. And when you talk to those developing countries, that changed the game, because now you're talking about people who can buy a $50 machine who will not really help them, turn them into a Chromebook and run a up-to-date, secure platform in their homes.
Absolutely. All right. Moving right along in terms of news, we've got some news out of PayPal. PayPal has launched a platform for you to be able to raise money for causes. And so this is really interesting. They're calling it the Generosity Network, and you can raise up to $20,000 on a project. Now, I'm curious what their limitations on what they would consider a good cause is, what you can fundraise for, because that just sounds like a lot of these GoFundMes and other platforms where you can raise funds for not just personal situations, but say a small business that wants to start and all they need is a couple $1,000s in order to get started. I wonder if they can use this platform for being able to do so. Clearly, they're launching this in advance of Giving Tuesday. So if you're watching right now, today is Cyber Monday, tomorrow's Giving Tuesday, the program that was launched in partnership with the YMCA out of New York and what other organization? There was two organizations, but it was the 90-Second Y and maybe the Red Cross. I could be getting that wrong. But either way, tomorrow is Giving Tuesday, or if you're listening to the podcast, today is Giving Tuesday. And so it's a major event for donating and giving to causes. And so PayPal was doing this, I'm presuming, to be, kind of in the narrative for that giving holiday. But I'm really curious about learning more about this because, obviously coming into contact with as many small businesses as I do in any given week, I'm very curious about how they're going to be able to utilize this tool in a business environment.
So our next one is QuickLogic releases their first firmware for their reader Papier. And so they just released their first upgrade, and apparently the sky is going to fall over us tonight. It's raining pretty hard here in New Jersey. So I apologize for the rain noise if you're getting any. But QuickLogic basically came with this 13.3 eNotes to the market, and now you will be able to do split screen, you will be able to do swap screen, open the last page, improve your PDF experience, the pen performance. So they really are trying to make this device a lot more powerful than what it was. It still have a $700 price point, but they seem to be trying to compete to the Remarkable 2, who has been having some success. One of the interesting things for me on the comparison between the Papier and the Remarkable is the operating system, because the Papier runs on Android. So I'm sure with that, they can add a lot more things with that technology application wise that are going to allow you to interact with things that you will not be able to interact if you are on the Remarkable. You will be able to install the Kindle, you will be able to install other things and keep that. So
Yep. And to round out our first half of the news for this episode is that Remember the Milk is now capable of supporting M1 chips, Apple Silicon. And so this is really a great addition. But Remember the Milk for Mac now runs, as they note in their post, smoothly on both Apple Silicon and Intel-based Mac computers. So they basically have published a universal app, is my understanding then, and you're going to be able to run Remember the Milk for Mac on your new Apple M1 chip devices. If you've already gotten one, good on you. But into next year, as you get some Christmas presents and some holiday presents, you'll see that it runs smoothly on those. So that's really great to hear, and I look forward to running Remember the Milk for myself on the M1 chips once I get my new Mac Mini. So with that, we have reached our first half, and so we'll now hear a word from our sponsor, W3C Web Services, and we will see you after the break.
Did you know half of small businesses don't have websites, and half don't make it past 1 year in business? Are these stats correlated? We're not sure, but we think you should have a website. W3C Web Services provides affordable managed WordPress website hosting, along with VPS, domain name registration, and other small business-focused services. For listeners of this podcast, you can book a free 30-minute digital marketing strategy session when you purchase a new hosting plan, $150 value. Once you purchase your new hosting plan, forward the receipt to support@w3cinc.com with the podcast title in the subject line of the email message, and we'll get you scheduled for your digital marketing strategy session. Head over to anythingbutidle.com/webhosting and get started with your small business website today. And now, back to your show.
Welcome back, everybody, to Anything But Idle, episode 32. And before the break, we were talking about the fact that Remember the Milk now supports Apple M1 Macs. And so that's exciting news. But now let's get on with the rest of our headlines this week. And so what is our next story this week, Augusto?
our next article, it's from Lifehack, and it's titled How to Feel Awake in the Morning, 7 Easy Tips. And it goes into, for the people who trying to wake up early, getting things done, and feel good about the day. It's you can watch the whole YouTube, and they try to, talk about how you will get better sleep, how to get up early, how to find success and happiness. 7 easy tips that you can get about that.
Yeah, and they talk about like walking barefoot outside and some other kind of interesting tips. They're just, they're little life hacks to be able to get yourself up and running in the morning. So you can go check out the YouTube video, and it's embedded on the article itself. Okay, next up is an article that is entitled 8 Totally Free VPN Services to Protect Your Privacy. And I just put this in here so that I could tell everybody, please do not use a free VPN. So it is a warning call that if you are using a free VPN, it is very unlikely. The only one that I recommend that is free is the one that is produced by Cloudflare called 1.1.1.1, or which is it's DNS. But the reality is that if you're using any VPN that is free, it is likely using your data in some way, shape, or form in order to make money, and so just don't do it.
Yes. If it's free, you are the product.
Yeah, it's a very unfortunate world, but that is just how it goes. Okay, next up is an article out of Todoist, and it's called "The Manager's Guide to Todoist," and it's just a basic article on helping you be productive and managing a team. And they go into just kind of different sections on doing that. I don't want to go into all of it here with you right now, but they have, in essence, 5 different sections: managing hiring and onboarding, managing work, managing people, managing the big picture, strategic processes, and then managing yourself, going down to that personal productivity level. And so it's just worth checking out. It's really well done. It's thoughtful. And I took away a couple of really interesting tidbits here. Nothing ground shattering, but if you are feeling any level of stress related to managing a team, especially in this environment, it's nice to be able to just kind of get a refresher and get yourself up and running there. Okay, next up is a Life Optimizer article.
Before we go there, I agree with you on the article. The article was incredibly well done. I was surprised, number one, how much I enjoyed the article, but number two, as you said, there's nothing earth-shattering on the article, but it's a great compilation. They should have made it a PDF. I did, but they should have allowed people to get it in PDF for future reference. It was that well done.
Absolutely. All right. Next up, a Life Optimizer article.
Optimizer. So the steward mindset, the key mindset to maximize your personal growth. And personal growth is one of those things that can be complicated, we tend to overcomplicate it much more than what is needed. But the reality is, it is really important. It's that mindset that is going to determine your action. It's that mindset that is going to lead you into the right actions. So it was a good article. I need to admit I enjoy a lot more the Todoist one, but it's still a really good reading.
Yeah, and I mean the general idea here is that they're talking about something. They're trying to equate this to the growth mindset idea, but the idea here is that you have responsibility to, in essence, help yourself, steward yourself toward personal development, and that this is something that is intrinsic, intrinsically motivated, and it's just good for you. And so, it's one of those motivational articles that helps you understand that you should be improving yourself on an ongoing basis, and why not get a little bit of excitement to do so. So I think it's a good addition. Again, nothing earth-shattering for me, but it's just a nice reminder that spending some effort and time on yourself is not ill-spent time. All right, continuing inside and on kind of the management space, Rescue Time put out a blog post called The New Do's and Don'ts of Effective Meetings, data from 1,000+ business leaders on what makes meetings work. And what were your highlights from reading the article, Augusto?
There was two things. One is they come later on the page and on the article to talk about how's the average number of meetings change in the last year. And basically, we're at this point talking pre-COVID, post-COVID. It's what it is. And I was interested, for me, the amount of people, we're talking about 30-something% of people who said, no, it's stay about the same. That's what impressed me. I was expecting actually more people to increase the meetings. I have seen, for me, my number of meetings may have not increased, but the way these meetings happen are, it used to be a lot more phone calls than what I have now. It used to be great. You go in that 3-minute phone call and move. Now everybody, let's meet. Oh, send me a link. Send me a Zoom link. Let's send me a Google Meet link. And that makes some of these meetings a lot longer than what a quick phone call is. So that's what I've been seeing with me. So I'm on that increase, group. But the other thing that has changed is, and that was interesting, is when do you prefer to schedule meetings? Because I avoid, like the plague, morning meetings. Okay? I don't like morning meetings because that's the time I get to work. And then if I get meetings there and the afternoon is usually full, I'm in trouble. So, but it was really interesting to see how many people prefer, these meetings in the morning. So, those two things were really, really interesting for me. They talk later about time blocking and Pomodoro and swallow the frog, the most important task to deal with all this. But for me, the two shocking parts were those two graphs in there.
Yeah, so they broke this down into 3 challenges, and I found this to be interesting just because they did the data research collection, I thought it was interesting. But they said building a culture of effective meetings comes down to 3 challenges: keeping the total number of meetings to a minimum, batching meeting time to allow for longer stretches of focus time, and running more effective meetings. And I can't disagree with all of them, but individually, keeping the total number of meetings to a minimum, I'm not necessarily sure what that means. I mean, you should have as many meetings as is necessary in order to be effective, and I presume that's what they mean by to a minimum. So I'll agree with that. But for me, when I am billing by the hour, more meetings is better for my business. So it's not a bad thing to have a lot of meetings. It means that my utilization rate is high. And so we all have to take into account that if you're, an attorney or an accountant or someone who bills hours in a consulting capacity, you need to recognize that, billable hours are more important. And if those meetings are billable hours, that needs to be taken into account as being kind of separate from what would be operational or administrative meetings or strategic meetings, or just outright social or non-work related meetings that are at work, whether that be via Zoom or otherwise. And so it's a little bit more of a nuanced conversation for me in terms of what is the actual makeup of the meetings, and are you the type of person who's more collaborative in thinking and therefore capable of being more productive in a meeting environment? For example, I know several people who get a lot of work done during a meeting because they're talking to people and then they're typing and moving things around, and they're like, oh yeah, let's move the calendar thing here, let's do this. And so they're doing things throughout the meeting. I don't have that capability. I have to take notes and focus on what's going on. Otherwise, I'm lost, because if I start doing something that's not different, but in the context of the meeting, if I try to do while I'm meeting, I lose concentration on the content of the meeting, and I can't really do that level of bifurcation. So I just don't. And I do the work that I need to do after the meeting, and that's fine. But there are some people who are very, very capable of doing that kind of multitasking, and it works for them. I'm not a fan of it. I don't like it, but I do know there are people out there who do. So we have to know our own work styles in order to be really effective. And so that's a piece there. About the other 2 pieces, I think absolutely putting together focused time where you can actually, get focused action work done. That is really important to be able to align in your calendar so that meetings don't override those pieces. Those are the important, not urgent functions in your life. And if you're not doing that work, you're really always going to feel like a laggard, and that's really unfortunate. Then, of course, running more effective meetings. We've done these discussions on Productivity Cast, so I would highly recommend folks jump over to Productivity Cast and look to our episodes about meetings and how to run effective meetings. And there are some really great tips in that Productivity Cast episode or episodes on meetings. So, great article there. All right, next up. We have an article from Leadership Freak on how to break free from people-pleasing and speaking your mind. And I came across this article and I just thought, oh, it's just a very simple checklist of things and interesting perspective on it. So the first thing up that the gentleman noted was that you have to own your addiction. And it says, begin by confessing you're addicted to people-pleasing. And I would argue that that's probably not the thing. So the thing is that you're addicted to avoiding conflict. So conflict avoidance is something that all of us, to some extent, either lend toward or are repelled by. Right. So conflict avoidance. There are people who love, conflict. So they're going to avoid conflict avoidance. They're going to be repelled by conflict avoidance because those techniques aren't dramatic, aren't crazy making. And for those people, they don't mind making conflict. So I get the idea of people pleasing, but understand that this is really about conflict. And we have to remember that the more or less we like conflict, and that's not a bad thing, right? There are good and healthy reasons for having conflict, right? Like if Augusto and I want to go to the movies pre or post COVID, and we say, oh, let's go to the movies. I'm going to go out to New Jersey. I want to take a 7.5 hour round trip drive, and we decide to do that. There is inherent conflict because I am a Star Trek fan, and Augusto is a Star Wars fan. And so that is a very healthy conflict. There's nothing wrong with us having a healthy debate over what we should go see in terms of a sci-fi film, or whether we decide to go take our loved ones to a more family-friendly film or otherwise. That's a conflict, and we need to know how to deal with that well. And if you're a people pleaser, then you're potentially going to get walked on and not deal with the conflict in a healthy way, which means that, in essence, kind of Covey-esque. You know how Covey talks about lose-lose, and lose-win, win-lose, and win-win. And many times it ends up being a losing proposition when you become a people pleaser. And so, just conflict avoidance is really really the issue.
I agree on that. It's more than the addiction, and I don't think the addiction is with the people pleasing, and there is people who may, but I think it's more with the conflict part. But I wrote a little book called Now, I don't know, some years ago, and the beginning of that book have a quote from Josh Billings that says, "Half of the troubles in this life can be traced to saying yes too quickly and not saying no soon enough." And I have that, or had that, in my office for a really long time, because it is not, the problem is not if you're people pleasing or not. The problem is what kind of trouble are you getting yourself down the road. And liking the conflict or not, it is worth it to get into that trouble. And sometimes it's not about saying yes or saying no. It is into understanding what are the consequences to what we are saying yes. And we tend not to think on that. We tend to underestimate that. And then we only notice it after we are in our neck, and it's like, oh. So
yeah,
I would say, ask yourself that if you find yourself related, or you can relate to this article thing, the answer to say I better know is to find out not the question they're asking, but what are the implications of such question.
Yeah, and so he has 4 more kind of recommendations in this article, and it would be injustice to not mention them, because they are all good after the weird addiction part. To I just don't like pathologizing things that aren't necessarily pathologies, or that are clearly not pathologies, because there are probably people who are addicted to things that are clearly interrupting and hurting their productivity, but people pleasing is not something that you are likely addicted to. But anyway, so number 1 aside, being avoidant to conflict. Number 2, he says, practice saying no before you need to say it. And that's, read Augusto's book. 3 is speak up with kindness. I liked this notion that we frequently want to, by thinking that we're speaking up, we're somehow being aggressive or, wrong, when in reality, we can be assertive and compassionate. We can be assertive and kind. And I really like this notion. So just number 3, generally, he has 10 little points there that I think are really worth delving into if you have concerns about coming up and speaking up with kindness, as he talks about. Improve incrementally. He's talking about narrowing the scope of focus to one thing at a time. Say no once this week, for example, is what he says. That's really nice. And then 5 is contradict your inner critic. And he writes here, your inner critic needs approval from others while disapproving of yourself. And so really good stuff here. This is actually also in line with his, I think he has a new book out. Am I incorrect about this? I thought this was all part of his new book, or at least some kind of notification about it, but I can't find it now. But either way, if you check out leadershipfreak.blog, you should be able to find that. Okay, next up, we have an article from Asana, from the Asana blog, about how to connect a distributed team at scale. And the article really just talked about the notion of connecting various tools together so that your distributed workforce, your distributed teams, are able to better scale, because once those tools are connected to one another, you're able to more seamlessly move in terms of size, but also move nimbly between different dynamic situations. So I thought that was really interesting. And so, when you connect tools, that tends to create the consolidation of tools. And so that means that not everybody is, you don't have half your team using Google Meet and half your team using Zoom and half your team using Microsoft Teams and, whatever, or that would be a third, and a third. But but the idea is that you are in some way, shape, or form bringing those tools into fewer of them so that people can be more productive in that space.
But there were three things interesting in here. One was, they give you an example of Asana and Zoom, and they give you an example of Teams. And I think if your company live in Asana, these integrations are key to get into the meeting, capture. As a productivity coach, it is so hard to see people coming with the notes of the notes of the notes. And I understand not everybody can do the multitasking, as you were referring previously in the meeting. Some people really need to take the notes and pay attention, and they need to come back. But not having those tools that integrate, or even a good place where you can put your own, it is so hard to process those notes. And I spend time teaching people split the page and teaching people how to manage those things so they could take the notes they have been used to, but also capture those actions, because not every time you have the time to go back and read 4 or 5 pages of notes, and you should be able to identify the action. So for the people who is more digital, being able to capture that directly into their Asana, especially if they are using it in the company, I think is fantastic, regardless if they are on Zoom, on Teams, or Slack, or Jira. So I think it is a fantastic news.
Wonderful. Okay. Next up is, and just as a point of closing that the loop on that, is that they're trying to showcase their integrations functionality. Asana now has the ability to integrate throughout this entire marketplace. We talked about that in a past show, and now they're writing content to really highlight that function. And you're absolutely right, Augusto. They're bringing that to the fore and doing it well. And I appreciate them letting us know the use cases for this and how it really does help a business scale. Okay, next up is an Art of Manliness blog post that was called "The 8 Things That Can Help You Get More Hygge in this Winter." And for those of you who don't know, hygge is a Danish cultural artifact, and it talks about kind of creating a cozy and comfortable environment in your home, and it's just kind of a contentment or wellness care practice within the Danish culture. And it's really interesting because this actually makes its way into a lot of productivity discussions about how different cultures actually embrace productivity in embracing the culture itself, right? And hygge is that kind of concept where you actually have the Danish people who have very cold months for a good part of the year, and how they actually establish themselves to have that kind of self-care, that kind of wellness care in built into their culture. And so I thought the article was great. It gives a whole bunch of great examples of really very, very Danish things, like lighting lots of candles and slippers and layering up with blankets and so on and so forth. So definitely worth checking out if you feel like this winter is going to be tough, because if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, at least, where winter is coming upon us, as opposed to those of you who are down in the Southern Hemisphere. And I'm jealous of you because spring is beginning and you will soon be into your summer, or spring is in full fledged and you're going into your summer. And that means I'll be wishing for being in the Southern Hemisphere right now. So check it out. Okay, next up is The Ladders. They came out with 13 books to read when you're in a career rut. And I thought this was really interesting because I don't know what it is like to be in a quote unquote rut with regard to a career. And so I looked through the books thinking, oh, this is going to give me some level of, insight into things that can help people in that space kind of come out of it. And I thought some of the books were actually really interesting. So did any of the books stand out for you, Augusto?
It was interesting because for me, I have been in that career route many years ago, and I work with my clients and coach with my clients with this. So there is some of these books that I mark immediately for reading that I have not read. I have read a lot of them, but there were some that I didn't. And so I always tell my coaching clients when we do this, to say, one of the things when you go to a driving academy, okay, to learn to drive at high speed, okay, one of the things they told you is, look, if you lose control, look where you're going to want to go, not the wall, okay, because you will hit the wall. And one of the things that I try to teach people, and I teach people when I do the coaching, is let's look what else is aside of the wall. And sometimes, yes, the place is a wall, time to leave. But a lot of times, it is really the perspective we have towards the wall that change everything. And I have been able to coach people, to leave and pack and do it in the best way possible, and coach others to rechange and rework the way everything was, to they go back to enjoying and having that big place. So it is without any questions an interesting read. So if you are looking for a good book to read and you feel you are in that place, there is a couple more that I can recommend.
Fantastic. All right. Next up is a birthday note to Gimp. So if you don't know what Gimp is the graphic image manipulation program, and we're currently in Gimp 2.0, I believe it is. But you can download Gimp from gimp.org. And what Gimp is in essence like an Adobe Photoshop. It's like a Photoshop alternative, predominantly for Linux, but they do actually have applications available on Windows and Mac OS X. So we'll see what happens, with the M1 environment right now. You have to jump through a few hurdles in order to get it working on the Mac OS, but it does work on it. And so Gimp is out there. It's been a great tool, and it's 25 years old.
I was surprised by the 25-year-old.
Yeah, I know. I think of Scribus and Gimp and those tools being available. I guess the big ones for me are LibreOffice, which is the Microsoft Office suite alternative, and then Gimp and Scribus, which is kind of like a InDesign. It's a scalable vector graphic tool. Those have been really the three main ones that I have seen grow over the years in terms of really strong free open source software. And I didn't expect 25 years, but it made me look in the mirror and remember the gray hair. All right, moving right along, there's an article called "Try This If You Want to Stop Working at Night." And this is all about the fact that many of us are working or overworking as we are in this, the COVID-19 pandemic. One of the real issues is that we're on the precipice of many, many layoffs, right? So we're going to see large companies starting to lay people off, and whether that's before the holiday, the winter holidays, or after it, it's bound to happen. We're coming upon this next huge post-Thanksgiving wave of COVID-19 cases. It's just all around bad news. And what that does for people is that they lose themselves in something. And for those of us who are productivity oriented, we sometimes will lose ourselves in our work. We'll try to cope by overworking. And so Darius Farrow wrote this article about how to really counteract that, how to really get yourself away from that. And he makes some really good arguments. I really feel like overworking is as unproductive as underworking. And so we really need to take heart to the fact that if you're working too much, then there's a rate of diminishing return with the extended number of hours that you're putting in, because quality goes down and concentration goes down, strategic thinking goes down. And so then you end up actually doing worse off. You start making poorer decisions. You start putting out less quality work, which means you have to redo or modify and edit that work more. And you just end up not doing as much. So he gives some really good suggestions for being able to do that. Which ones kind of stood out for you, Augusto?
Actually, it was a really great article. I agree with him. Too much work is counter intuitive. And I love the fact that, limit the devices. And I really I've been for years. So I have the iPad that I work, and it's an iPad Pro 12.9 inches. That's the iPad that I spend most of the day. But during the night, I go, or as soon as it's done, I go to the iPad Mini. And the iPad Mini can I access everything work-wise in the iPad Mini? Yes, I can. But it's work or configure in a completely different way. It's more personal-centric than work-centric. And all the notifications for work and stuff are, red bubbles, everything that is related to my professional side or my work, it's completely deactivated. So I don't get a notification. I don't get any on that iPad. So after I leave this desk, I can grab that thing and don't really be called to work. As I tell people, the problem is not that you want to work. You may get a great idea, do it, but you need to deactivate the notification so you don't get called. You don't have the temptation. It's if you can deal with the temptations, fine. Most people cannot. And the other thing I have is all my devices all the notifications turn off unless you meet certain criteria at 9 p.m. And he said 10 p.m. And I will disagree that 9 p.m. is even better, because what happened 10 p.m. is you get the 5 more minutes. So let me deactivate it and go. Okay. You will do the same at 9 p.m., but you are still going to get ahead, probably half an hour to 45 minutes into getting that disconnection from the device, go grab a book and all that. And I've been a multi-device guy for many years, and I recommend the multi-device because of that. There is people who have, as you were describing before about meetings, there is people who can have one device and don't open their work email. There are others like me, okay, that cannot do that. Okay, if we were not mature enough to do that, I will work otherwise all day. But then if you are not in that camp, then have multiple devices where I'm not saying don't connect it to the work, fine, but make it hard for you to access. Don't put it on the dock. Hide it three folder down, so you need to do, and it's annoying. So you or go and find a work device or don't do it. That's my advice on there.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so next up we have an article out of Scott H. Young, and he's talking about the missing practice and his discussion about the missing practice in terms of a foundation for a good life. He says is having conversations with people who are, I'm presuming, unique and different and potentially smarter than you or otherwise, more skilled than you. And he gives a couple of reasons for this. He talks about books being general and conversations being specific. I disagree with that point. That doesn't make the veracity of the article any less, but I don't disagree. I just disagree very much with the fact that books are somehow general. Books are good books talk about something very specific, and they cover that in depth. And I'm having a conversation with the author, no matter how kind of seemingly one-sided it is, it strikes up for me lots of new ideas and challenges me to answer those questions myself if the book doesn't answer them. So I find books to be actually a very good form of conversation with myself, with the author in an asynchronous fashion. So I don't see that as an argument, but I do see the importance of engaging people in conversation. And of course, he then goes on to say a lot of important knowledge can't be written down. People are showing you ideas. People are talking to you about things, and through that conversation, those things happen. Access matters, it says. And so, of course, if you know somebody who you have access to that other people don't, that obviously gives you opportunity, and they can also open up opportunity for you through them, right? If I know someone who is able to give me access to somebody else, that's going to be good for me as well. And so, yeah, he gives some suggestions on what you should do, some unique, what do you call it? Graphics associated with it. So it's a well-done article.
The graphics were fun.
Yeah, it was a well-done article, and
good article.
And I like the idea of you talking to people. There's really a good reason to connect with people. That's not my argument. My argument was just the fact that somehow books are less good for you. I really don't think that's the case. I think you need to have a good mixture for in that concept of the good life, you need to read, and through reading well, right? Which is, again, for me, being in conversation, being in right relationship with the author, and asking questions as you are reading, and then being answered, getting those questions answered, or finding out the answers yourself. That by itself is the process of being able to grow. And so I would say that I would take books out of that argument, and the rest of the article stands. All right, next up, Augusto, what do we have next?
Well, the next one is an article on how Microsoft Edge received new copy-paste feature to take on Chrome. And after Microsoft decided to get Chromium as the base for Microsoft Edge and make that transition, they still have the same problem. Try to copy from the web, paste in documents and SMS. And what Microsoft is trying to do with Smart Copy is to clean that and really make you able to really copy and paste from the web to a document. The article concludes saying, hey, this is a smart move for Microsoft, and say, yes, if you try to make your browser useful, this is going to be, and trying to be ahead in this game, even if you're going to do, or you are going to do is a Chromium base, I think it is a good thing.
Yeah, it's interesting to me. From my perspective, it's good for Microsoft to keep adding new and useful features. I'm very happy about that. But the reality is that if I need that to happen, then I'm going to go to Edge, do that thing, and then I'm going to go back to Chrome. And I think for most people, they're going to do that with their primary browser. And those of us who are, call it, savvy enough, or at least technologically capable enough, will know how to use other tools for these kinds of specific features, and then we'll go back to using our normal daily drivers. And I think it's good to know the feature exists, because there are times when you want to be able to copy and have a replicated nice copy version of that thing that you're copying into another environment. So it's good to know it exists. And this is something that I use Evernote Web Clipper for quite frequently, because the Evernote Web Clipper can copy in that HTML mode. So it's doing a pretty robust web clip, and then I can move that data into other environments. I've even found that when I copy things from Google Docs into other places, I will sometimes get a better copy by copying it first into Google Docs and then out of Google Docs and into wherever I'm trying to get it to. So it just depends on what you're doing. So it's just a good tip to remember that different editors apply different metadata into the code. So you might have some HTML code, you can't see it. That metadata is manipulating the code. And so by copying it between some of these environments, you can actually either include or basically filter out some of that gunk that's causing the paste not to happen. And also remember, Shift, either Command or Control V, is your friend when you want to just copy plain data. So and Google Sheets, we talked about this before, but Google Sheets includes that new smart functionality. I actually saw this in working myself the other day. I was typing something, and Google Sheets kept completing the data. And I was in my Google Workspace account, so it was pulling data from my own systems, and I just kept getting shocked because I was like, what is it doing? And it just kept adding in data, and it was saving me huge amounts of time, because as I was tabbing over, it knew what next to put into that field. So I'm very excited to see this machine learning algorithm start to kick in and start to put data in where it just needs to be. So I'm very excited to see this happening across the board. But again, you can copy and paste into Google Sheets, pull out data, extract data, and move those into other places. So just remember that you have that capability. Okay, next up, another Edge component.
The other Edge is, Edge has something really annoying. If you try to copy a URL, they copy the title instead of the URL. So the article talks about how to change this and how to make it work for Microsoft Edge 87 for Windows, 88 for Mac. So back to the regular copy paste where you can get the URL and go to your browser of choice.
Fantastic. And to close out our headlines, we have one final Microsoft piece of news. So
Microsoft Teams is trying to take on Zoom, offering an all-day video for the web, actually, for the Christmas and Thanksgiving. And they are going to offer everybody to call all day to be able to connect it. That I don't know. It was interesting. We're recording this episode after we talk on the video, but it was a short call. It was not a dinner with the people. We have tried the dinners before. It's awkward. So, and the time zones don't help.
Yeah.
You know, our biggest issue is the time zone. It's a 2-hour difference. So it's, you know, or somebody need to eat really early or somebody need to eat really late. And at the end of the day, that doesn't work. So I don't know if you're in the same time zone, this will be something that is appealing for people. It will need to be seen.
So but Zoom was just for Thanksgiving, but Microsoft Teams is now free for everybody altogether, is my understanding, right?
Oh, I understood it was just during this week, but I could be wrong.
Let's look, because I think that's important, because I think they are making it just, there's a free tier now, as opposed to Zoom, which was just making that group calling more than two people.
Up to 49 friends and family in gallery view. Oh, interesting.
Yep. And you can use the together mode, which is that layering mode where people are kind of in a stadium seating environment. So you this is now, it's giving you Microsoft Teams for up to 49 people free. So this is a huge play at Google Meet and Facebook Messenger rooms. So this is their play at that piece, so that you can, in essence, start being productive in virtual environments, not just at work, but also at home.
No, it is team. No, I think it is just for Thanksgiving, as the article, the other articles, the article on The Verge says that is just for Thanksgiving. So during the Thanksgiving break, they were allowed to lift the theme, same as Zoom did, not permanently.
When does it stop then? Because the article I read basically said it was free forever. So that's interesting. Okay, so now free for use for 24-hour video calls in your browser, and
oh yeah.
Up to 49.
You won't need a Microsoft account or the Microsoft Teams to join calls.
Right.
As you join free via web browser. Wow.
Yeah, so this is only in the browser version, is my understanding. So you're limited. You can't use the desktop application, but this is free in the browser. And they're basically challenging
everybody.
Yeah, I mean, this is free. Just like with Skype, you can have these meetings now in a group environment free. So just wanted to make people know that.
Yeah. Sorry.
Awesome. No worries. All right. With that brings us to the end of at least our headlines for the stories of the week, which brings us to new tools of the week.
Oh, yes.
Augusto and I come across many personal productivity tools and services each week as we're culling through all of the various news and putting them together for you. We find tools that we know, we enjoy using, that we've just recently found and thought were really interesting. And so we try to bring you those new tools so that you can check them out. So they're potentially new to you, they may be new to us too. So with that, let's talk about our new tools this week. So for our first new tool this week, I wanted to bring up a tool that I've been using for a long time, but we'll call it a new tool for you. And that is a tool called Brain.fm. And Brain.fm allows you to, in essence, put on a headset. You have to have a headset on, and it plays what it calls functional music. And this is a little bit more sophisticated than what some people know as binaural beats, because it is listening to how you respond to that music, and then giving you the ability to focus, to be able to go to sleep and sleep better, and or go into light study mode. It really uses this very unique science and technology, capabilities to help you get into the zone you're looking to get into. So I highly recommend it. And there's actually a science section here where you can go to brain.fm/science. You can read all about what they're doing and how they're doing the work that they're doing. So it's very, very cool. And I have been playing the different types of music for several years now. And then what I will do is I will play my normal music over it so that I'm able to go ahead and listen to the binaural beat, no, to the brain.fm soundtrack, and then play the binaural beat. I'm sorry, my normal music on top of the that brain.fm as well. Augusto, are you ready with your?
I am. We are going to talk about Sidekick, and Sidekick. It is something interesting. Again, I live on the iPad, but if you live on a PC or a Mac, they also have some Linux for RPM and dev. But basically, you will be able to go and turn this Sidekick into a Chrome OS browser and put all your apps on the side, so you can click from there and get into your apps as if they were applications on the bar. So that way, instead of have multiple tabs on the back, on the top, you will have them all in the side. All your apps will be home, will have a place to go. Even if you have things like Google, you will be able to select or Gmail, you will be able to select your different Gmails when you access. So it was really interesting, especially for those people who have a bazillion of tabs open all the time. I don't know who to use and get some benefit out of this. The tabs are awesome, but I think a lot of times we have tabs of tabs. Grouping them per application, I think, is something that will be also allows you to work with people, show workplace spaces, and everything else. So I thought it was a really good thing for people who don't know the app.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, I definitely am interested in this. I mean, it's challenging tools like Shift and Station and that kind of thing, where it's giving you a browser that holds those kinds of web apps. And when you're using primarily web apps in your world, why not use that kind of environment to be more productive? I love it.
It was interesting because I was doing this and my kid came and saw that and I said, "Oh, can I do that on my on my Chromebook at school?" And no, you cannot install Sidekick on the Chromebook at school. But then I teach her how to create tabs on Chromebook that then can be look as little apps on the dock, and she was really, really excited. And basically, she reproduced this on her Chromebook, so that was really fun.
That's great, and hopefully, Chrome brings vertical tabs to it. I mean, you can install the vertical tabs. The vertical tabs Chrome extension, but my understanding is that you can't actually have side tabs. I'm now looking because my understanding is that you can't have side tabs. Let's see. Side tabs. They got rid of it back a while back. I think you were able to at one point, but they got rid of the vertical tabs. There is a browser extension called Vertical Tabs, where you can kind of have a similar sidebar type thing on the left hand side, but Firefox has it where you can actually have all of your tabs on what would be here for you if you're watching. It would be up and down, and I really want to see more of that. And if Sidekick is going to give you that functionality for those kinds of working applications as opposed to your normal browsing, right? I want to be able to see the things that I'm browsing and looking at that might be in Chrome, but just like the general workhorse applications, those can be in maybe a different tool or otherwise. I really like the idea of maybe running Shift, Station, and Sidekick, and those having different context of work. So in Sidekick, I might have my design stuff. In Shift, I might have a set of applications for email and calendar and task management. And then in another one, that's where I keep my personal applications. So there's some potential opportunities there where you can split those pieces apart. All right. Those are our new tools of the week. Hopefully you got some value out of them. Maybe you'll try them out. Let us know in the comments or elsewhere on at anything but idle. You can tweet at us if you find one of them to be useful to you. Okay, that brings us to our main story this week, which we've already done one about Chromebooks, and so we thought this episode we would talk about the best Windows laptops of 2020. And MakeUseOf.com had put out the 7 best laptops of 2020, and I just wanted us to have a conversation about really what has been the best of those devices in 2020. And I have to say, the best one that I've seen so far has been the Microsoft Surface Book 3, and that ended up being the top pick for their premium choice. So I thought that was really interesting because the Microsoft Surface Book 3 is really a beautiful device. All of the details about it, Microsoft has really done a great job of creating a great experience on that Surface Book. And they come up with a couple of other ones that I had forgotten about, and then I was like, oh yeah, that's right. Microsoft has the Surface Laptop Go. I totally forgot that was even in the market. So it was good to see that. The Dell XPS 13, that comes up as their editor's choice. I thought that was a really interesting choice just all around. Dell does make good Windows devices, certainly in a work environment and just as a workstation. But their laptops, the XPS line, as well as the gaming brand, I forget what their gaming line is called, but those gaming laptops are also really, really good. And so I was pleased to see those show up. And then last but not least, in terms of the premium pick, was the Microsoft Surface Book 3. The Dell XPS 13 was their editor's choice. And then their best value came in with the Acer Swift 3. And so the Acer Swift 3 was their and honestly, I haven't looked at one. It has an AMD Ryzen 7, so the CPU is a AMD CPU. So I really haven't looked at it, and I will want to do a little bit more research on that. I have to say that the laptops I've really seen is Acer has the Switch 7, and of all of the kind of it's kind of like the Apple iPad Pro in the sense that it's a touchscreen device with a magnetic clip-on keyboard cover, and it is just a really, really great computing device. And so of all of the ones that I've really thought were the best, the Switch 7 is a really, really nice device, and I'm surprised it didn't show up on the list. But that's built by Acer and is just what I think is just a very, very nice two-in-one PC, right? Like it gives you a laptop environment with a tablet feel. It's a little bit on kind of the Microsoft Surface Book 3 pricing, where it comes in around $1,600-$1,700. But it's I think, a really nice device for the cost.
Yeah, I look at the list. I mean, obviously, Microsoft has done such a great job to make all this the Surface line, and they have really made an incredible thing. But I wasn't in. I don't know if I didn't look at the specs correctly, but it seems like that Acer was not touchscreen. That was interesting for me, that it was not a touchscreen. Everything else was, and even with the MacBooks, and I understand the why don't, but I understand that if you wanted to touchscreen that now, how thin you can go into that bezel, it's affected. I get it. And then the weight, if you make it heavier, then you need a heavier base. Otherwise, you need some kind of support, problem that has the original Surface and so forth. So on all those things, I get. But it's still surprising for me, especially on a laptop, that you make it to the best value or to the best computers without one, especially because I don't want anything that and it may be completely a preference thing, but I don't want anything that is not touchscreen at this point.
Yeah, I go back and forth, right? Because I certainly have devices that are not touchscreen, and I still feel like I want them to be. Even understanding the fact that I'm not always going to get that, and I'm going to still want a fairly robust processing system with a capability of, I'm hoping in the future, them being touchscreen, but I'm not foregoing necessarily right now. I feel like there was a point earlier in the year where I was like, that's it, nothing. I'm not buying any more devices that aren't touchscreen. And I've definitely compromised on that. One is I bought the Raspberry Pi 400 to play with, and that doesn't have a touchscreen. So although that's more of a toy than anything else for me, I still find that I do have mostly touchscreens around, but my primary desktop yet isn't. And I think that I actually want it to be at some point, but I'm just, it's working. Everything's doing its thing. I don't need to spend more time forcing it to be touchscreen than not. So I hear what you're saying, and I'm almost there. Maybe in 2021, I will probably make that next step into it, where I'll say, okay, you know what? I'm not making any more purchases of devices that are not touchscreen, and kind of, just go from there. But right now, I think I can make the recommendation that some of these laptops, like the Surface Book 3, which is really nice and is touchscreen, but that's not the reason. If it wasn't, I would still probably recommend it, but it is nice, and it, clicks apart. You've got a nice touchscreen, after that. I mean, some good things there. One of the other things that stood out to me is that the Galaxy Tab S7, which came out this year, was also not on this list. And I understand the kind of argument that, what's a tablet versus a laptop anymore? There's this blurred line for me. I see the Galaxy Tab 7S and the 7S Plus certainly really more in the tablet space. You have a great laptop, modality there with the keyboard and so on and so forth. Now it's running Android, so obviously it's not in the Windows lineup, and that's why it's not. But it's in that character of laptops that I think about. But either way, the Switch 7 is a 13-inch convertible, and that is a Windows 10 laptop, and I very much believe that it should have been in this lineup of the best Windows laptops of the year. And I've seen several Switch devices now, from the 5 to now the 7, and just great performance out of them. A little bit of issue with the touch. The touch screen, the fingerprint sensor to unlock, but that's like Windows updates, and it causes it to break, and then it fixes, and whatever else. But for paying a much lower price than you would on buying a Surface Pro, you're getting a really nice device. And so I've really liked the Switch line of devices. Any other thoughts, Augusto, regarding Windows laptops this year?
No, I think we have covered them all at this point.
Yeah, I'm trying to look to see what the other ones. Oh, so just so everybody knows, the other ones that they had offered were as I said, the Microsoft Surface Laptop Go was number 4. Number 5 was the HP Spectre X360. Again, a foldable. You can flip it over and use it in a tent mode, or as a kind of a tablet. The Huawei MateBook 13. I'm not sure if you can buy that in the States because of the block on that. And then the Asus ROG Zephyrus SGX701. And no, I've never heard of it. And no, I don't know what it looks like.
Oh, it is that is a monster thing. It's a 17.3-inch laptop.
Oh, got it. So that's a gamer. That's a gaming laptop.
It's a gaming thing. It has a Windows 10. It has a GX701 GX. It is a monster. It's really, as you said, or a heavy design person, or a gamer. And what it has special is that even with that, power, it's still really thin and really light for what it is. It's still 0.73 millimeters thin. That it is pretty thin, and so you can get a monster power wise 17 inches with that, less than a centimeter thin.
Yeah, at $3,000, I can get better. I can get better devices for
Different
that.
discussion.
Okay, quick announcement then as we close out the show. Augusto, you had an announcement?
No.
I see here LastPass. Announcement about LastPass. Well, either way, I'm seeing an announcement, and it says you can get 40% off LastPass Premium currently during Cyber Week. So it's Cyber Monday, so I'm guessing that's the case. But it looks like it's only available for the next 4 hours. So if you're listening to this in the podcast, you missed it. Sorry. But if you're watching now, you have 4 more hours to get 40% off LastPass Premium, which is a pretty good discount. It ends up being $1.80 per month billed annually. So I don't know how it showed up in our announcements, but there it is, and now you know about it. So with that brings us to the end of our show today. If you have any questions about any of the stories that we discussed, you will find those in our show notes. We'll have links to all of them for you to be able to access. And if we missed something, you can go over to our contact page at anythingbutidle.com, or you can tweet or DM us at anythingbutidle on Twitter. And so if you have a question or comment, as I said, you can go ahead and also leave those comments on Anything But Idle. While you're on Anything But Idle, you'll notice that the show notes also includes a machine-generated transcript, so you can jump to sections in there. We have extra links to any stories we didn't cover in a show, and so all of that stuff is there, the links to the new tools of the week. If this is your first time watching the live stream, you could do us a favor by clicking the thumbs up icon. That helps us to bring new personal productivity friends into the fold, and so thank you. If you're listening to the podcast in the audio version, you can also leave a rating and review in Apple Podcasts or Stitcher and otherwise. That, of course, helps expose us to more personal productivity friends out there in the podosphere. So thank you for doing that as well. With that brings us to the end of Anything But Idle, the productivity news and technology commentary show. Thank you to Augusto Pinaud for joining me this and every week for Anything But Idle. And with that, take care, everybody. Here's to your productive life.
Thank you.